having an entrepreneurial mindset, we also think about, innovations. Again, when I say innovations, mostly we whenever we hear of innovation, we think of patents, we think of, intellectual property, something new, a new invention. No. So innovation is that also, but innovation, and when we talk about entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial mindset, innovation is more about coming with a new way of solving problems. For example, if I just give you an example, when COVID struck, unfortunately 4 years ago, right? The businesses were forced to innovate. There were new work from home policies that came up, and the businesses which never thought they could work remotely started working remotely. They built their business strategies, their business work plan around it, and everybody innovated it. So, for example, I was at 99 acres heading the residential rental business. So at that time, the market just kind of crashed. So we innovated with a new product where we said that we'll have the video tours of the property where the landlord is staying in the same property and could give a video tour to a prospective tenant. Now this product was not there earlier, but then the circumstances forced us to innovate. So innovation is not just about a new product. It could be a new idea, it could be a new strategy, it could be anything. When the let's say the banks 2 decades back, they started with internet banking. Before that, nobody thought that banking could be done from home, which is so natural for you and me right now. It was unthinkable. There were so many systems and processes, but somebody started it. Somebody came up with an app, somebody came up with an OTP, somebody came up with internet banking, seeing your passbook online, making transactions online. And today we are sitting in a world where most of our transactions happen from home. So this is innovation. So when I talk about entrepreneurial mindset, these are the things that an entrepreneurial mindset would have. Now, last point here, you might not be a founder on paper while doing all of these things. So whenever we see firms and companies, we will see so many people being promoted, going higher up the ranks. They are people who have an entrepreneurial mindset. Now they might not be the promoters of the company, they might not be, let's say, the founders of the company, but they have an entrepreneurial mindset, that this is what sets them apart from others. So entrepreneurial mindset, I hope we have some understanding now. And it could work in businesses, in startups, in corporates, in any type of a work environment. Now, design thinking. So we spoke about entrepreneurial mindset, design thinking, and you could just listen to me here. So whenever we are solving problems, right, one very important thing is making the solution human centric. What I mean by human centric is that in very crude manner, if I am solving a problem for which and I am trying to make a business out of it, if you actually think of it, you're not doing it for yourself, right? You are doing it for the the 7.8 billion people out there. They are your market. You are not your market. You are not going to use your product, or maybe you would, but they are the people who would be using it, and they are human beings, right? So if you are thinking of coming up with a solution, coming out with a service or a product around it, innovating, and then coming out with a startup idea around it, you have to know the people who would be using it, and you have to understand the human being, their nature, your target market, which we call in the parlance, what is your targeted market, or your the market that you are going to tap, right? So what are their problem statements, how are they thinking, what are they thinking, how do they feel? And once you know about this aspect, only then you would be able to come up with a product which is a success, or let's say which has a greater chance of being successful, right? So it might require a lot of out of the box thinking from your side, but also it might require entrepreneurial mindset from your side, number two. But it would also require a structured human centric approach, right, where you are seeing customers as humans, people having emotions, having needs, having pain points, and how is your product going to solve it. And we'll see a few examples later on. So, and if I just summarize this slide, it is more about starting off with observing people, listening to people, interacting with the people who would be using the product, and then going forward with their ideas or the product that you're thinking about. So design thinking, we've already spoken about it. So what it does is it helps you crack the complex problems that are out there in the market, which you are trying to solve for. It apart from the analytical tools and the capabilities, it is a creativity oriented framework which helps you unlock the innovation and growth within the organizations. So design thinking is one such framework which provides us with an approach for dealing with complexities and unstructured problems, as we said. This framework, when it is coupled with entrepreneurial mindset, can allow individuals and organizations to differentiate their value proposition more effectively and compete in new market spaces. And that's what you ideally want. Because if you are coming up with a product or a service and you do not have a unique value proposition, you are just one out of the million businesses out there. Any price fluctuation, anything new will just go against you. So you need to have a unique value proposition, and you need to have the capability to compete in a new market space. And that's what design thinking helps you with. Now, before we deep dive into design thinking, which is a culmination of everything that we will just discuss in this workshop, let's understand the way an entrepreneur should think. How, if you are thinking, if you have an entrepreneurial mindset, how should you think? And this might be something very crude, that what do we mean by thinking? We all think every time, every moment. But then the point here is that how should you as an entrepreneur, or you as a person with an entrepreneurial mindset, should think, right? So let me just take you through a few different approach which is most conducive for you if you are taking up the journey of an entrepreneurial, or of an entrepreneur, or let's say having an entrepreneurial mindset, right? So, and each will have its own unique characteristics and applications. So let's just deep dive into it. So before I go forward, right, any one of you could answer me. Let's say if I say uh, Siddharth is here, right? And Siddharth, if wherever you are staying right now, if I just ask you that, Siddharth, I would just want you to enter the house and go to the kitchen, right? It's very easy for you. You know that you will enter, you will take a right or a left turn, take 3 steps, 4 steps, then take a left or a right turn, 5 6 steps, and you reach your destination. It's very simple, right? That's there. Now second, if I ask, let's say Rajesh, who is on the call, that Rajesh, you enter into a park, and I say that, and there is, uh, uh, let's say there is some sort of a spot in the park which is somewhere in the top left or top right quadrant, and you need to go to that spot in the most efficient manner, right? And covering most of the spots in the park. So what you will do is you will identify what are the spots in the park. You will take different routes, you will try a few routes, and then maybe you will find the one which is most conducive. If I go back to our school days when you used to do experiments in laboratories, so when we had to identify a compound, let's say, then we used to do many exercises. Maybe first time we would test out if it has magnesium, so we will conduct the test on magnesium identification, no, fine. Then we would conduct an experiment on copper identification, no. Then we would conduct an experiment around chlorine identification, no. Then maybe in the last experiment which we did, we realized that it is, let's say, sodium, or let's say some other element, right? So we did 3 or 4 or 5 experiments. So that is another approach. So the thought process changes. In the first, it was pretty straightforward. Second, you are experimenting again and again and again. So that's the second type of thought process. The third thought process is, uh, you know I can't see all of you, but I would just ask maybe most of you to have 6 dots in your notebook, something like this. I'll just create it here, right? Something like this, if you can see my screen, right? And if I ask you that how can you join all the dots without lifting your pen? Or maybe what I could do is I joined the all the boundary points, right? And there is a point in between, and I tell you that if you have a pen and a paper, right, and I want you to join all these dots and also go and put a dot in the center without uh, lifting your pen. So how would you do it? If anyone has maybe done it earlier, or maybe anyone has an idea, you can just write in the chat box. Am I audible? So let me just show you, how we could do it. So these are the six, these are the points, if we can see, right? These are the 6 points. What I will do is I will just connect these points like this, right? And without lifting my pen, I just take the pen like this. I'm not take the pen like this. I'm not lifting. I mark this, right? So maybe most of you knew it, or maybe some of you didn't, right? But the point that I'm making here is that it is not very straightforward. Whatever we did right now, it's not very straightforward. So now we can go to the next few slides, and now the concept would be very clear to all of you. The first process that we just spoke about was linear thinking. Linear thinking is a way of, it is also called a sequential or logical thinking, and it involves a step-by-step process where each step follows logically from the previous one. And this method is very structured, very orderly, and used in situations where there is a clear or a direct path to the solution, as we spoke earlier, right? So the characteristics are it's sequential, logical, predictable outcomes, and so that's what a linear thinking process is all about. So let's say we were speaking about going from the entrance to the kitchen door, right? Maybe if I tell you that, we have to bake a cake, it's your birthday, and there are recipes, step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. It's a very logical sequential process. Project planning, very sequential. Do market research, product design, prototype development, testing, launching. So it's a very set process. So that's what linear thinking is all about. Second process is when it's an iterative or cyclical thinking. It involves revisiting and reevaluating ideas. So when I spoke about the chemistry lab, right, we did not know what the answer is. We are again and again going on loop, and we are experimenting. So it's a circular thinking, right? This approach emphasizes reflection, feedback, and continuous improvement also. So the characteristics are repetition and reflection, feedback loops, non-linear progression, and adaptability. So a few examples here could be, so one was when, which we just spoke about, let's say experimenting to find out a new drug, or let's say its efficacy. Then those of you who are um, into the technology side, we, or let's say coming up with any new feature, or going after the being involved in agile methodology. Whenever you go for a new app feature, you always plan, you define the feature requirements, you build the feature. When you build it, it's not perfect, definitely it's not perfect. We evaluate its performance, speak to the stakeholders, analyze it, gather the feedback, then refine the feature, then again build or refine the feature again, evaluate its performance. So it's a circular approach where you are basically trying to test it out again and again. The third aspect here is most important, which is lateral thinking. So, and why we are coming to lateral thinking is because when you have an entrepreneurial mindset and when you want to solve unstructured problems, right? In the first two processes, the problems are a bit structured, 2 plus 2 gives 4, 4 plus 2 gives 6, right? But when we are talking about coming up with a new idea or new way of thinking or new approach to problem solving, which is going to add value to that end customer who still is not satisfied, you need to have good command over lateral thinking. So lateral thinking, when we say lateral thinking, is all about, so it's a term which has been coined by Edward de Bono, and it involves approaching problems in an indirect and creative manner, which we just saw in the 9 dot example, right? Where and the characteristics of lateral thinking would be creativity and innovation, right? It would be non-sequential, as we just saw in our example. It is breaking the patterns. Whenever I and when I'll just go back to this example once again. It is breaking the pattern. So when I tell you that you have these 9 dots and one dot is in the center, and you cannot lift your pen from the paper, our our current thinking process forces us to think that it is not possible, because if I can't lift my pencil, if I can't lift my nib, then how is it possible? So but lateral thinking encourages me to break free of my established patterns and thinking in a novel manner, and often it is provocative. So when all of us like to be challenged, but the mind sometimes, whenever it gets challenged, it is a provocative part, because the mind also wants to solve it, but the traps of an established pattern doesn't really help in solving it. So any sort of a problem statement which is unstructured and needs to be solved, there are enough and more chances that it can be solved through lateral thinking. If you look at the major innovations all around you, in terms of products, in terms of services, in terms of strategies, anything, it has been a lateral thinking. Somebody thought very innovatively, somebody thought out of the box and made it happen. So all the thinking ways of thinking are great, right? But when we are talking about entrepreneurs, or let's say an entrepreneurial mindset, lateral thinking is something that helps us a lot in coming up with the ideas that will help you create a good startup that will earn revenue for you. So now, and there are a few examples of lateral thinking. I will not go in details, right? But now, uh, another way. So the third thought process that we just saw, the way of thinking, is lateral thinking, a word which has been coined by Edward de Bono. Now, as a startup founder, or let's say as a person who has an entrepreneurial mindset, whenever you think of an idea, uh, you know and sometimes, and this is I would say something to be wary about as a founder, and I say it from my personal experience, that sometimes when we are coming up with a new idea, we fall in love with that idea. So for me, let's say it was property management. So I really thought that it's a great idea, it needs to be done. People are facing so many problems, there are so many lakhs and lakhs of houses locked in India, and they could be opened up if I just go out and create a property management portal. So that was my thinking, right? But now when I look back, and for myself and let's say for other entrepreneurs, there are various frameworks through which you can test your idea, right? One of the framework is something that we will just try to speak about to assess your idea, right? And why do we need to assess our idea? Again, for the simple fact that whenever you are devoting your time, your energy, I would even say your relationships, everything into a new idea, you would really want it to be successful, because after 2 or 3 or 4 years, when you would look back, you would have seen there's a big opportunity cost. There's large amount of money that has been invested, and more than that, a lot of time has been invested. So it is very important for us to look at any idea from various angles, various angles before we take it ahead, right? So let's just go through a framework here. And if you have any questions around it, feel free to put it in the chat box. But let's start. So we're talking about Edward de Bono's six thinking hat. So Edward de Bono is the person who coined the term lateral thinking, and when which is a great technique that has been used over the past many decades, right? So when we say six thinking hats, each hat is a way of thinking. So let's say if I talk about any book, let's say if I talk about, let's say, this book which is on my table, Be Saved from Mental Tension. Maybe if I am going to write about this book, I need to think from different angles. Is it relevant for students? Is it relevant for professionals? Is it relevant for homemakers? Is it relevant for teenagers? Is it relevant for old people, right? The more perspectives I add to my writing, the better my published book becomes, right? So coming back to a startup idea, so what Edward de Bono says is that whenever you have an idea, you should think of it from six different angles at least, right? Which are called Edward de Bono's six thinking hats. The first idea is the first hat is the thinking hat is about information and data. So whenever, let's say, and we'll take an example also. So let's say if I am thinking about coming up with a new portal on listing properties out there, right? So we've all heard about 99 acres and Magic Bricks and housing.com and related property portals. So let's say if you're thinking about coming up with a new property listing portal, right? So first part would be white hat. That is, how many portals are there without any emotions? How many portals are there in India? How many houses are there in India? How many residential complexes are there in India? How many of those complexes have their properties listed on the online platforms? What is the traffic that these online platforms generate? What is the kind of demand that these online platforms generate? What is the kind of revenue that these online portals generate, right? And many, what is the CAGR of this property market in residential rental, in residential resale, in new homes, in commercial? So I would just want to collect all of these information points, right? No emotions attached, no nothing. That's the first hat, right? Which is the white hat. So, and although it looks very obvious, but you'll be surprised to know that many of the times when people start up, they do not have an inkling about all the data points, and sometimes it's a revelation while they're going for funding rounds when the VC tells them that, boss, this market is degrowing, why are you into it? And that was something that even the founder missed. So that's the first part, that's white hat. Second hat is red hat. Red hat is, what is your emotion and feeling around this idea, right? And this is very important because when we say about emotions and feelings, yes, Shrishti, yes, we can say that there is no specific. Uh, we cannot say that this part one or part two is definitely one of the starting points, but yes, this is one of the first ways to test out your idea, right? Because if you are just looking at things from one angle, it will not suffice, and that increases our chances of failure, right? So the first part here is white hat. You take up the hat of just data points and you collect all the data points. That's number one. Second hat is emotions and feelings. So let me just go into details. Third hat is critical judgment. Fourth is positive judgment. Fifth is creativity alternatives, and sixth is process control. Let's get into a bit of details. So first, we already discussed information and data. You have to be neutral and objective. Again, neutral and objective, not having any kind of bias, right? Just focus on facts and data. What is the information we have? What do we want to know? How can we get the information we need, right? So this is part one. Very simple, very straightforward. Just collect the data points, right? And you will be surprised. Second is emotions and feelings. You know, sometimes when we see cricket matches, right, and every data point, every statistics would tell you that Kohli is doing great, everything is great, but somehow we feel, boss, today I don't think Kohli will perform. You don't know the reason, but you just have that feeling that maybe today Kohli won't perform. If you are taking a bet, you won't take it on Kohli. So are these irrational thoughts? No, they are not, but they are not the center point. So apart from data, have wear a second hat where you think that where you just think to yourself that how do I feel about this idea? What is my gut reaction? What are my instincts telling me? And you'll be surprised to know that your gut reaction, your instincts, your feeling are not irrational. They come up with some sort of information point that you have collected over the last many years or decades, things that you have seen around you, the things that you know about Indian market, about people, about the changes that are happening in the government, what all and what not. If I ask you to write them down on a paper, you might not. But the culmination of all that is your gut reaction, your feeling. So this is also an important hat. So that's number 2, right? Third is critical judgment. So let's say if I talk about property management, I would go gung ho that was property management. What say? There are so many people doing it in the Western world. It's easy to do. People want it, this and that. I have a good feeling around it. Fine. But I need to wear the third hat, which is called the black hat, which is critical judgment. I should ask myself, and this is, I would say, the toughest question to ask oneself: what could go wrong? What are the weaknesses? What are the risks? So when I think about the property management market, maybe I have the keys with me. If anything goes wrong in that house, there's a burglary, there's some wrong incident, who is the person responsible? I am the person responsible, right? This is a So there are operational risks, there are financial risks, there are there are many other risks, there are people risks, there are the vendor management could break, right? I am dependent on the maintenance guys, the brokers, the interior designers. What if they don't do their work on time? What if they start to promote themselves on my behalf? So there could be various weaknesses, various things that could go wrong. So the third hat that all of us should wear is the black hat, where we are noting down all the points that could go wrong in the idea that we are thinking about. Fourth is yellow hat. So apart from things that can go wrong, there are definitely things that can go right. There could be benefits, values, or positive outcomes. So this is the optimistic hat, where you kind of, and this is something which comes naturally to people with entrepreneurial mindset or founders, that you think big. You think what could go right, going from valuation from 1 million market, doing so many things, expanding to international markets, whatever. So write them down. What are the strengths? What are the benefits? And is it a good idea? And so this is the fourth hat that you need to kind of wear, right? Fifth is creativity and alternatives. So generating new ideas, possibilities, and alternatives. So the fifth question that we need to ask ourselves is, what are the alternative ways to do it? What are some creative solutions, and how can we overcome the challenges? Where you kind of let's say, for example, you brainstorm on alternative marketing strategies or unique selling propositions or whatever, but you're thinking of things which are not straightforward but which could be a new possibility, right? So let's say when I was thinking about property management, I also thought that if I do property management well, and if I have so many landlords and so many tenants with me, and I know that they have good paying capacity, I could build a business around credit cards or credit worthiness, which could be used for credit cards, which could be used for banking and so many other things, right? Maybe I could create a system around that. So that was an alternative or a creative solution that could come from this idea. So that's number 5. And last is, you culminate all of these things together, these 4 or 5 things that we just spoke about, and you say that this is, what is my next step? I know what are the data points, I know what could go right, I know what can go wrong, I know what is my feeling around it, I know what are the alternatives. Now let me, if I just don't do anything, then it's analysis paralysis, as we say, right? So then you need to come out with a blueprint, and that is why it is called blue hat. That what is our next step, what have we learned, and how do I organize the thinking, and what do I do next. And this is where your plan of action, your strategy, your goals do come along. So this is, so whenever any one of you, and I see many of you here, whenever any one of you is taking up an idea, it is advisable that we think of that idea from various lenses, and this is one way in which you can be, let's say, more assured about the idea and its efficacy. Because ultimately, and let's just remember that we are not doing this for ourselves, we are doing it to create a value proposition for our customers in the market. And if it is created and if it works well, the business will thrive, otherwise it will not. So I will not go into the examples because we've already spoken about it. Now, another small thing, and then, as I said, design thinking is a culmination of all these things, right? So better. So the two other things are convergent thinking and divergent thinking. So let me ask a question here to all of you. Let's say if you are thinking about coming up with a new idea and you don't have any inkling what that idea would be, right? But your aim is that it should be profitable, it should be scalable. These are your boundary conditions. And you're looking at a D2C sort of an approach, not a B2B sort of an approach. Then would you just think about one idea and take it forward, or would you really want to think about various ideas and then choose one of them? So you could just write in the chat box. If you think that you would want to think about various ideas, then write, let's say, A. Or if you think that you would just want to take one idea and go move forward, then you could write B. Various ideas. Great. So Mugdha wrote various ideas. Anyone else who agrees with Mugdha? Various. Great. So I'll also say various. I'm with Mugdha and Vivek and Ginny. So great. Yeah. So that's the perfect answer. We would want to go with various ideas, right? Now, let me come to another thing. I say that I have various ideas. We brainstormed various ideas between me, Mugdha, Vivek, Ginny, Shrishti, right? And all others who are there on the call. Now, if you want to start off, if you want to actually start off and test out one of the ideas, or test out an idea, let's say, would you choose one idea to test at one point of time, or you would test out, let's say we discussed 50 ideas, you would want to test out all 50 of them? So what would your approach be? Matlab, you would try to come to one idea and test it, or you would try to test all the 50? So if you say all the 50, you could write A. If you think that, okay, yes, A/B testing is what Shishti said, right? And Shishti, when we talk about A/B testing, let's say we ultimately, and that's very good that you kind of spoke up about it. So whenever we talk about A/B testing, or let's say, as Ginny and Kaushik said, one idea, what we are doing is, if you really look at it, we are converging our thought process, because as human manifestations of human beings coming together. So out of the 50 ideas, we take up one or two idea, right? And how we do it, we all are clear now. You could use the 6 hats that we just spoke about, and let's say those 2 or 3 ideas, right, which you think can work, you could do, let's say, an A/B testing. Or what you could do is you could choose one idea which most of us, so let's say there are 12 or 15 people here on the call, let's say an idea which is convincing to, let's say, 80, 70 or 80% of the people, or majority. We take that one idea and we try to execute it, right? So what I've tried to discuss with all of you right now is what we call as divergent thinking and convergent thinking, right? And as a person with an entrepreneurial mindset, you need to have both of them, right? So divergent thinking, so let's just move forward. So I will not go into the definitions because all of you kind of just made it very very clear with your chat box inputs. But basically divergence or divergent thinking is when you are expanding yourself to a scope of many possibilities by generating broad range of ideas, insights, perspectives, right? One of the things that one of you said was brainstorming. Then mind mapping is a technique where you kind of have one image and you just start to branch it out. Ki I say ki, let's say spirituality, if my one branch would be, let's say, meditation, another would be worshipping, another would be karma, another would be this. Then in meditation, I further branch it out, ki morning meditation, evening meditation, nature meditation, mind meditation, this and that. So what I'm doing is I'm just mapping my mind, right, to all the thoughts that are coming. It will be a broad canvas which I fill, but I'm not stopping myself. So this is called as divergent thinking, right? You kind of brainstorm a lot many ideas and you don't stop yourself, right? There are various ways and means, so we don't have time to go into details. But convergence is when you actually have to test out something, as Shrishti very rightly pointed out, or Ginny or Kaushik, that whenever you want to actually, you have discussed a lot many ideas, brainstormed, divergent thinking. Now you want to take up one idea and you want to test it out. So then this is convergent thinking. It is about eliminating the other ideas, right? So it's a thinking phase, or right. So there are various techniques, as you can see on the screen. You could have dot voting. So let's say if 13 of us was there and there were 50 ideas, जैसे हम लोग KBC में करते हैं, right? A, B, C. Somebody would have said, okay, we'll go with idea A, somebody with B, somebody with C, and we have one idea, which is the final one, right? We do a SWOT analysis, we take up Edward de Bono's hat, and we come up with one final idea, right? And this is convergent thinking. So now what we've done is we have created a base for design thinking. I'll just revise with you whatever we've learned in the last few minutes. One, and just be with me. One is convergent and divergent thinking, and we all have come to a conclusion that both of the things are important for us, right? That's number one. Second, what we have done today is what are the how do you assess a business idea through Edward de Bono's thinking hats. That's another thing that we discussed, number two. And number three, what we discussed is the kind of thinking one could have, and which is the one which is most relevant to the entrepreneurs. So we spoke about circular thinking, we spoke about linear thinking, we spoke about lateral thinking, and we said that lateral thinking is something which is most suited for an entrepreneurial mindset. So that's one. How to assess the entrepreneurial idea, that's number two, Edward de Bono's hats. And third is the way of thinking, convergent thinking and divergent thinking. These are the three major things that we kind of discussed. Now the fourth and the last point, everything that we've spoken till now forms a base for this. Taking all these things together, convergent thinking, divergent thinking, using lateral thinking more than linear thinking and circular thinking, and looking at one idea through various lenses, from the data angle, from your intuition angle, from the things that could go right, from the things that can go wrong, from the alternatives that could come from the blueprint. So when we have taken all of these things now remains is making it human centric, because we, as we all said, what design thinking is all about, right? Thinking is empathizing, right? So let's say, if I, and I'll just give my example. When I see somebody as a human being, if I look at somebody as a customer, what I typically do, and maybe I did it the same way, I'll just go with a survey ki, boss, do you think you have. So legal work also, this and that, right? And how much do you want to pay? So what I'm doing is I'm just looking at a I will try to know what is the person feeling. So what is the person saying? What is the person feeling? And what is that thing in person's mind which the person is thinking right now but is not telling me? जैसे सिद्धार्थ मुझसे बोलते हैं कि कैपिटल एप्रिसिएशन है, तो मुझे कहीं ना कहीं सिद्धार्थ ने बोला नहीं, बट आई नो कि ही डज नॉट सी प्रॉपर्टी मैनेजमेंट एज समथिंग जिसके ऊपर वो रिस्क लेना चाहेंगे, बिकॉज हिज एक्सपीरियंसेस हैव नॉट बीन दैट ग्रेट। एंड अगर उनको मिल भी जाता चीज कोई मैनेज करने के लिए, तो शायद वो नहीं करते, बिकॉज द मतलब ही हैड सोर एक्सपीरियंसेस, राइट? तो I know what he's saying, I know what he's feeling, I know what he is thinking, right? And this is how I kind of empathize. Is defining. So before, and this is a mistake that most of the entrepreneurs do, that they do not define the problem. So when I speak to all of you, I define my problem statement. My problem statement maybe is that people need a trustworthy solution for to manage their property in the same manner as friends would be doing. तो आप देखिए ट्रस्टवर्दीनेस problem statement is not property management. My problem is statement is the definition of the problem statement is that I need and something which ensures the return for the person for whom I am data, sat with the team and tried to draw insights. Second is defining the problem statement. I have not yet come to any idea, right? And just adding one thing here, when we empathize, it is divergent thinking. आप चाहोगे कि आप 10 नहीं 50 नहीं 100 नहीं 2000 लोगों से empathize करो, because the larger set you have, the better your insight would be. So that is the first part of design thinking, is divergent thinking embedded into empathizing. Second part is convergent thinking, where we say that now taking all these insights, we will define the problem statement. So this is the second stage, right? अभी आप देखिए, this is all in all a human centric approach till now. Third stage is ideation, right? So now, when I spoke to people, I empathized, I drew insights, I defined my problem statement, the thing that I wanted to do. Now we will all sit, in our team meeting and we'll ideate. So now Kaushik will come with an idea, Donald will come with an idea, Rajesh will come with an idea, Nilesh will come with an idea, Srishti, Siddharth, everyone will come with an idea, Ginny, let's say a hardcore operating model. One of them could be a tech model. One of them could be we will just go and do property inspection and all the other services would be add on, but it would be, let's say, on the on call basis. Second would be that we will have everything integrated into one solution and we'll call it one stop shop for people who are living away from their property and want a trustworthy solution. So there could be 10, 15 maybe solutions that come out. So and this again, this is divergent thinking or convergent thinking. Let's say if I talk about the third point here, which is in red in top right, ideate. What do you think? Are you ideating a lot many things, or are you ideating just maybe one or two things here? Diverge, absolutely. Srishti, Donald, everyone. So I would say this is divergent. So Srishti, you're right. Donald, Vivek. So basically, it's divergent because what you're doing right now is that in empathizing, it was a divergent thinking. You are empathizing with so many people. When you define a problem statement, it's convergent. Then when you're ideating, there could be 10, 15 ideas on the table. So it's divergent thinking, right? We are not executing an idea. Maybe that's where the confusion came. We are not executing the idea. Ideate means just to think about an idea. So when we are ideating, it will be many things. So because we do not want to restrict ourselves to any one idea right now, so it's divergent thinking in play. And at the back of it, the base is lateral thinking again, because this is unstructured problem. You cannot be solving it through just one standard manner, right? So then ideate is basically divergent thinking. You're thinking of many ideas, right? So this is the third stage. Now, now I would say is where, let's say, Donald and Vivek were right. That is fourth stage, which is prototype. So what we discussed earlier was, then when we have a lot of ideas on the table, you could not be executing all of them. Maybe hypothetically you could, but it does not work that way. So as a team, as a organization, you would try to test a few of them, or let's say maybe one of them. So what design thinking says is, take that one idea, right, and you kind of create a prototype out of it. So let's say in the out of the 5, 10, 15 ideas that came up in the discussion, there is the one idea that most of you, or maybe everyone, or let's say most of you are agreeing. And how would you agree? We all know that we've seen Edward de Bono's six thinking hats. Test out every idea on those six parameters, on the data, on what could go right, what could go wrong, what is your gut feeling, what is an alternative. Have that kind of a structured approach on all the 5 6 ideas that you have, and then maybe choose one of the idea which looks most uh, which is most human centric, because let's try to keep that picture in mind, that design thinking is very human centric in mind, because it plays it sees people as people, it doesn't see people as customers, at least in the start. So choose one prototype, start creating that prototype, experiment it, and uh, uh, take it out into the market. And one thing about design thinking is, it says that do it very quickly. You cannot, because time is of value, you cannot just sit over one of the ideas that you have kind of uh, zeroed on and not take it to the market, right? So what design thinking says is that in stage 4, which is prototype, you just very quickly go out in the market in a small subsection, and you test that idea out through a prototype. So let's say if I was talking about property management, right, एंड आई नो दैट प्रॉपर्टी मैनेजमेंट अगर किया तो बहुत बड़ा पोर्टल होगा, प्रॉपर्टी इंस्पेक्शन होगा, ये होगा, वो होगा, एंड टेक्नोलॉजी होगी, फलाना ढिकाना। तो मैं क्या करूँगा, मैं एक छोटा सा लूँगा, मैं उसमें एसओपी बना लूँगा 2-3 कि प्रॉपर्टी इंस्पेक्शन में दिस इज व्हाट आई विल डू, प्रॉपर्टी रेंटिंग आउट में दिस इज व्हाट आई विल डू, एंड टेनेंट वेरिफिकेशन में दिस इज व्हाट आई विल डू. Small sort of a prototype. I'll go out to, let's say, 10-15 people in my locality and say that, boss, this is my property management solution, please try it for 15 days or for 1 month and let me know. They will tell me their feedback in, let's say, 15, 20 days, 30 days, and that is how I am taking my prototype to the market. So prototype was the fourth stage, where we kind of zeroed in on one of the idea, make a prototype and go out in the market. And fifth and last part of design thinking is testing. And again, testing is divergent thinking, right? So prototype is convergent thinking. You take one prototype and test it out. Maybe it passes, great. If it doesn't, go to a next version, go to the next idea, then go to the next idea and come back, right? And how do you do it? You test it out. If I test it out on just 2 people, so let's say there are 13 people on the call, if I really want to be successful, my testing ground should be much, much more than these 13 people, right? So you do as much testing as you want. People, let's say in property management, go to people who are youngsters, let's say people who are there in their 30s and 40s and have taken a property. That's your one section. People who are in 50s, they've taken a property. People who have multiple properties, that should also be your cohort. Then properties which have been bought by males, which have been bought by females, property which have been bought by brokerage houses, properties which have been owned by banks and other institutions, right? So you'll take as many cohorts as possible, right? But test it out. So when you are testing it out, you kind of go into a divergent phase. You do it on many people, uh, persona 1, persona 2, persona 3, 4, 5, and you kind of test it out. So that's the fifth part of design thinking. And when you are doing all of these things, uh, one important point in design thinking is, from a prototype stage, you can go back to ideation, that's fine. Key prototype is not working, go back to the drawing board, ideate again. Sometimes what happens is that you need to define your problem again, right? Key your 2 or 3 prototypes have failed, you go back and you ask yourself, have I defined my problem statement in the right manner? Maybe you find out that no, there was 1 or 2 more elements of definition which were missing. So you refine your problem statement definition. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes your prototype and testing phase also force you to go back to the first stage, which is empathize. Maybe you just empathized or collected information about or spoke to just 10 or 15 people. Now your prototype and testing, basically your testing is telling you that you're not out there. You need to have a much broader, let's say, cohort. So for empathizing, because that will help you in definition of problems. So from prototype stage you could go back to ideation, you could go back to definition, you could go into a lot of detail. What I wanted to do was introduce you to design thinking, right? And with the things that we have learned about lateral thinking, with the things that we've learned about the 6 thinking hats, with the things that we have learned about convergent and divergent thinking, now with this framework, right, you could assess any idea with an entrepreneurial mindset, take it forward, test it out, redefine, re-empathize, re-ideate, come with a prototype too, and test again. So this, in a nutshell, is what design thinking is all about. I think we've ran out of time. So what I'll do in the next 2 or 3 minutes is I'll just give you a few, examples. Few examples. I'll just look at this one. So ketchup. If you look at, let's say, 2 decades ago, or maybe a decade ago, it was like a bottle which is on your left. नॉर्मल बॉटल रहता था, लोग उसे यूज करते थे. अब यूज करते हैं, मैं ऐसे केचप ले रहा हूँ तो कई बार द केचप drops would fall on my shirt, would fall on my plate, table, and all that, right? Now ketchup is out there for last so many decades. Somebody would have gone to the end users, looked at them as a person. कोई किसी ने बोला होगा, यार देखो मैं डालता हूँ, मेरे ना शर्ट पे गिर जाता है, मेरे टेबल पे गिर जाता है, जो भी है. उसने उसको एज अ ह्यूमन बीइंग देखा, उसने कहा हाँ यार ये तो है, मतलब द प्रॉब्लम हैज बीन सॉल्व, बट नॉट रियली. इज देयर एन अदर वे टू डू इट विच इज मोर कन्वीनियंट फॉर द पर्सन? तो किसी ने जाके केचप में क्या किया कि नीचे उसको डिजाइन ही बदल दिया, कि उसको उल्टा कर दिया, और बस आप लो एंड यू जस्ट प्रेस इट, द केचप कम्स आउट एंड दैट्स इट. So that's the design way of thinking, right? It's lateral thinking. अगर otherwise, अगर मैं normal circular way of thinking use करता या linear way of thinking use करता, I would have stuck to that ketchup bottle. And maybe the companies that have done gone with the second version are the companies which really expanded their customer base, because people liked it. काम तो पहले भी को मजा ज्यादा आ रहा है, लोगों को कन्वीनियंस ज्यादा लग रहा है, और लोगों को ये लग रहा है कि हाँ यार किसी ने मेरा प्रॉब्लम स्टेटमेंट सॉल्व किया, right? So this is one way of design thinking back. And Airbnb was at a point jab they were making less than $200 a week. Now what the founders did was they went to New York, they met with a lot of people out there, right, जिनके houses थे जो वो Airbnb पे चढ़ाने वाले थे या नहीं भी चढ़ाए थे, and they sat with them, they kind of tried to, matlab, what are your expectations, what are the things that bother you, as a owner, that as an investor. Back, they really redesigned their entire product outflow after all of this experimentation, risk, and thinking out of the box. And that is how Airbnb became the firm that we all see right now. I don't think we have the time to look at I would say, the best example out there of Apple. But uh, I believe these videos would be shared with you. So I would implore you to have a look at the design thinking and innovation at Apple. Because Apple as a firm, and I'll just take a small 30 seconds brief here that mobile phones were always there. Nokia was always there. Few touch screens were coming up, right? What was that difference that Apple created? It is very, we cannot cover it actually in one session also, but just for your understanding, and this is a video that all of you can see at your leisure. Apple always has design thinking at its core. Whatever product Apple creates, be it uh, MacBook or iMac or iPhones or iPods or whatever it is, they always have design thinking approach. Whenever you take an Apple product, you you feel connected. So it is not automatic. There is a lot of research, there is a lot of science, there is a lot of design thinking process that goes on in Apple as a firm. And that is why you take all the other phones, at least if I talk about a decade back, you can take all the phones separately and Apple phone separately. Every phone has a touch screen, every phone has the features, but somehow the people who use Apple for the last, let's say, 10 or 15 years haven't got out of that ecosystem, because Apple genuinely tries to create a connection. So now, not really endorsing or promoting any brand here, but just saying that Apple is one, if you want to really understand design thinking, Apple is one really good example for you as a case study. So Mugdha has just shared a small video of 7 minutes. I implore that all of you could go and watch this, right? So I think I would just so design thinking, lateral thinking, six thinking hats, and entrepreneurial mindset, other various things that we covered. I hope we all, apart from the slides, from whatever I've discussed and you all have discussed with me, we all have got a sense that having an entrepreneurial mindset, how should one move forward, how should one assess the idea, what are the frameworks, what are the ways to think, and all of these things coming together through design thinking can increase your chances for success as a, let's say, as an entrepreneur, or let's say as a person who has an entrepreneurial mindset. So there are a few things which I've kept it on appendix. Maybe when you go through them, you could just see, what are empathy maps, how do you synthesize empathies, uh, the needs of people in the empathy stage, how do you synthesize insights. You should also look up customer journey map, affinity map, how to develop user personas, mind maps, and all, which we just discussed. These are workshops in themselves, I would say. But I think today all of us have got a very good grasp over how to proceed in such a direction. As we had mentioned, this is 101 of design thinking and entrepreneurial mindset. So at the end, I would say your feedback really matters. So whatever you've seen, you've heard today, you've grasped, please share your feedback. Right, on LinkedIn, you can tag the Juno School of Business, share your experience on the workshop, and if you try it out in one of your ideas, maybe you could share that also, and you could connect on the given email ID at hello@junoschool.org. So great. It was nice. Was on the call right from Vivek, Donald, Mukta, Shrishti, Kaushik, Ginny, uh, Abhishek, Siddharth, Rajesh, Nilesh, and everyone. Although I can't see names of all of you, but thanks so much for joining in. And I hope whenever you take that plunge, be it in your own organization or something new, you use these principles, you use